What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And today we're going to look at the MLB standings as of the morning of June 21st, 2021. It's been a little over a month since we last did this update, so I figure the time is right. So as always, we'll go division by division. As you can tell, they are color-coded. We will start with the AL East. Now, currently Boston sits in first place. Tampa Bay is right behind them, half game behind them. New York sits a little bit behind them. Toronto is in fourth place as they sit at 500, and then a distant last is the Baltimore Orioles. So Boston's looking good. This offense is just looking amazing right now. This offense is continuing to play well. The pitching staff still scares me. Wander Rodriguez, like his underlying numbers show that he's better than he is, but he is not doing good. So I'm not really a big fan of the Boston pitching staff. I mean, Rodriguez isn't doing good. Garrett Richards is your number 2 pitcher. Nathan Eovaldi, I'd say, is actually the number 2, Richards number 3, but none of those guys impress me. So it's going to come down to how good that offense can be. Verdugo is definitely taking that team places. Obviously, Bogarts and Devers are both producing immensely. So Boston's going to go as far as their offense can carry them. What really helps Boston is the fact that Tampa Bay just got some horrible news with Tyler Glasnow. Now, if this was last week, I would be saying Tampa Bay's got a great chance to make a big run. However, in the past week, Tyler Glasnow, it was announced that he has a torn UCL, so he will be out for, or partially torn UCL, so he will be out for a while. He was placed on the 60-day injured list. Obviously, he was the only pitcher that Tampa Bay brass felt comfortable letting pitch more than, a couple innings, so it seems. So that's a huge loss for Tampa. On the flip side, they did finally, at least allegedly call up Wander Franco. It's alleged he'll be called up tomorrow, June 22nd. We shall see. But Tampa Bay, still, this is going to be a team that they were surging, but now they're going to have to kind of rebound because losing your ace is never easy. Next, we have the Yankees. Now, the Yankees, they're in an interesting spot. So this is a team that the offense is there, the pitching is there on paper, but they've been so streaky and inconsistent. Obviously, Aaron Judge is doing good, but he still is dealing with a couple, injuries that make him day-to-day. Giancarlo Stanton, just, same thing. He keeps getting hurt. He's been out for much longer than Judge has. Of course, we're finally seeming to get Luke Voit back. If you're a Yankees fan, that's good. But DJ LeMahieu is not looking good at all. So the offense is extremely inconsistent, and then the pitching staff still isn't the best. Luis Severino hopefully will be back in about a month, maybe a month and a half. He did suffer a setback in his rehab, so that's a positive for New York, that at least he is making his recovery from Tommy John. And then you got Toronto. Now, the problem with Toronto is basically a lot of their big teams are not doing good. A lot of the big players, are not doing good. Hyun-Jin Ryu, he's not looking amazing right now. He's not producing at the level that they want him to produce. He's always been one of those guys that you look at him and you kind of think, oh, this guy's good, but he's underrated because he doesn't do well in, fantasy formats. But he's just not doing good this year, period. Of course, George Springer's only played a handful of games. Kevin Biggio came back from the injured list recently. He started off this year horribly. He did have a nice, resurgence right when he came back. He's slowed down once more. But Bo Bichette is still looking to carry this team. Of course, the big guy on that team, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., dominant. He's right up there for the home run lead. So it's going to be interesting to see how Toronto can do once they start getting the reinforcements back. It really makes you think, if they had a reliable closer like Kirby Yates, how would they be doing? And of course, if Springer was healthy, how would they be doing? Baltimore is just in a bad place. This team has a lot of issues. They were never expected to be good. It's just going to come down to, can your prospects start to produce at some point this year? Can you start calling them up? And how many of these players will you be trading away? Next, we go to the AL Central. Now, Chicago currently leads this division. Cleveland sits right behind them. And then you have Kansas City below 500, a distant third behind Cleveland. Minnesota hanging in there, but still about 2.5 games behind Kansas City. And then Detroit, once more, a half game behind Minnesota. So this is a very strange division. Chicago, last year, I really liked Chicago. And this year, they're proving me right. So Chicago's looking great. you know, what they did is they played well against Tampa this past week, but then they got beat up by Houston. So it's going to be interesting. This pitching staff is not the best, but they have gotten some very good value out of players like Lance Lynn, Carlos Rodon. So it's going to be interesting. Of course, Yermin Mercedes really has cooled off since his blistering hot start, but other Chicago hitters have stepped up. The big problem for them is Nick Madrigal is done for the year. So he was a very reliable on-base guy who could steal bases if given the opportunity. So Chicago, they do have some problems. Jose Abreu's still here. He's still producing. But Chicago's just, 3 of their starters are possibly done for the year. We don't know about, Eloy Jimenez when he's going to come back. If he's going to come back, same thing with Luis Robert. We don't know when those 2 guys will be back. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do if they're buyers or sellers at the deadline. Cleveland is another team that is surprising me. Of course, you can't talk about Cleveland without mentioning Jose Ramirez. Ramirez is basically the offense on this team. He's just amazing. He's hitting homers left and right. Of course, he's just that good of a player. Outside of him, there's not a lot of talent on that offense. So it's going to be interesting to see what they can do. Now, the pitching staff is there still. Problem is, Shane Bieber's currently hurt, and he hasn't been doing amazing this year. Aaron Savale, I will have to give him credit. He has stepped up, and he's looking like a potential future ace if Bieber continues his downward slide. But I think Bieber's still the number 1. I think he's just been dealing with an injury. Bieber is currently on the injured list. So Savale, he has cooled off a little bit recently, but still, those 2 guys can anchor a team for the future, for years to come. They're both in their mid-20s or younger, so there's a lot of confidence coming from Cleveland for the future. Jose Ramirez, of course, the big guy to keep an eye on in Cleveland. Kansas City now. Kansas City's in an interesting position. They're still in a rebuild, and that's just unfortunately how things are going to be going for them. So Kansas City's not a bad team. The big thing for them is, how long will Adalberto Mondesi be given this chance? He keeps getting hurt. I think he started the year on the injured list, came back, played a couple games, went back on the injured list, recently came back, was starting to produce in a few games, and now he's once more dealing with an injury. I believe it's a hamstring injury. So it's just rotten luck for him and this team. The pitching staff, they've had some decent appearances or surprises. Look at Mike Minor, for example. So it's just a little crazy with this team. Joey Gallo's doing what Joey Gallo does. He hits homers, but he's not leading the league in homers, but he is leading the league in strikeouts, at least last I checked. So they got to figure out what to do with him. He is a pending free agent still. That's not good. So Kansas City, Whit Merrifield is definitely their best offensive player right now. You got to give him credit. Salvador Perez is also doing very good, but Whit's number 1. Minnesota, I predicted this earlier in the year. I said Minnesota was going to have a tough year, but I didn't think they'd be this bad. I have no idea what's going on in Minnesota. The problem is they signed a bunch of veterans to 1-year deals. How have those guys really worked out? Not good. It's just Alex Colombe, the reliever, they thought, if we pay this guy a decent 1-year deal, he'll come in, he'll solidify the back end of the bullpen. Has not worked out in any way, shape, or form. And then, of course, they signed Andrelton Simmons to take over the shortstop position. He started off the year good, but then he got hurt, and he's been struggling since. So it's a tough situation for this team. They did call up Alex Kirilloff at some point earlier in the year. He hasn't really been producing like you'd hope. He's been very inconsistent. Miguel Sano is doing what Miguel Sano does. He's striking out a lot, but he's hitting a few homers. He's sitting below the Mendoza. Josh Donaldson's been dealing with injuries. So, of course, they recently did get Byron Buxton back. He's been out for about a month and a half. So it's good to get him back, but he was like potential MVP level when he was there. Maybe his return helped spark something. Now, Detroit is only a half game behind Minnesota in the standings. So, if you told me that at the beginning of the season, I'd be saying, wow, Detroit's doing good. No, Minnesota's just doing bad. Detroit's not in position to win right now. They don't have a strong team. I think everyone knows that. They have a lot of younger, talented players. So there's a hope for the future. So we'll have to see what they can do with what they have. There's not a lot of big players to talk about on this team. So, you could talk about some of their pitchers, but realistically, someone like Turnbull, you bring him into another team, he's probably a 4 or 5 starter. So now we're going to go to the AL West. Houston just took control of this division recently. Oakland sitting right behind them. They're technically tied, but Houston has played 2 less games, so they get the edge. Seattle sits behind them, currently above 500. Speaking of 500, there we have the Angels. Then the Texas Rangers sit in a distant last place. So Houston has been red hot lately. This team is producing. They've been stomping on everything that goes in their path. They are currently leading the league in highest with run differential. They have the highest one at plus 106. So this is good. This team is just red hot. It's, of course, disappointing to see if you're a baseball fan that this team is still producing. Now, you have to wonder if losing George Springer helped or hurt this team. Right now, Altuve is doing all he can. Correa is doing very good. Bregman's currently hurt. So the fact that they're doing good surprises me. Same thing with Kyle Tucker. He's currently on he has a viral illness, so he's on that injured list. So there are some key pieces that are missing, but the offense is still producing. The pitching has left some to be desired, but you still have some guys. Framber Valdez has really stepped it up this year since coming back from his injury that was apparently expected to cost him the whole season. He's looked electric since returning. So it's going to be interesting to see if Houston can keep up the pace. Oakland is sitting right behind the Angels, and Oakland's doing pretty good. So Oakland has some good players. Matt Olson is probably the guy helping this offense. Matt Chapman, the partner on the other end of the diamond, is not doing good, which is, of course, a little depressing if you're an Athletics fan. They both had bad 2020s. At least Olson has seemed to come back. Chapman has not. Other than that, the offense is exactly what you expect with Moneyball Oakland. So it's not the best. It's not the worst. They're going to keep getting these cheaper guys and hope that they work out. The pitching staff, it's there. They're doing a good job in Oakland. Jesus Luzardo, of course, had one of the weirdest injuries recently where he allegedly, he broke his finger playing video games. We all know what that meant. So that was an interesting story when that came out. Seattle, of course, is hanging above 500 right now. And I don't think a lot of people were expecting Seattle to be above 500 at this point in the season. So you got to give them credit. This is a team that's just hanging in there. So Seattle is hanging in there. They don't have a lot of guys that I really want to talk about. By far the best player on this team has to be Mitch Haniger. He's just doing it all. He's hitting homers left and right. It's good to see him back. He missed most of the last 2 years due to injuries. So very happy to see Mitch Haniger just dominating. Unfortunately, Jared Kelenic did not look good when he came into the league. He started off hot, but he is hitting below 100 right now. They demoted him to the minors. He may or may not be back soon. He's a player to keep an eye on. The Angels currently sit at 36 and 36. Now, there are, of course, 3 players you have to talk about when you talk about the Angels. Actually, I'll say 4. So the first one, Mike Trout. He's been out for a little while with an injury. He's on the IL. He was doing pretty good when he was healthy, but now he's hurt. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the team and when he comes back. Shohei Ohtani, number 2. He is doing the 2-way starter role. He is doing great. He currently is tied for the league lead in home runs. So he's obviously producing on offense. Pitching, he's still a pretty good pitcher. He's not an elite shutdown number 1 pitcher. He's not an ace, but he's a more than serviceable pitcher. So obviously Ohtani, great player too. Jared Walsh, he had just amazing hot start. He has cooled off considerably since then, but he is still a good player. They have been putting him in the outfield. And of course, lastly, if you're the Angels, we have to talk about Anthony Rendon. Rendon has not been doing that good, which is a little disappointing if you're an Angels fan. Angels, I got one thing to say to you. Don't waste the careers of Trout and Ohtani. If you do that, no one will forgive you. Now, of course, the Angels did recently get rid of Albert Pujols. That looks like it may have been a wrong move to make. We shall see in the future how it works out. Last place, we have the Texas Rangers. Is there really anything to talk about for Texas? Texas is just not producing right now. This team stinks. Outside of Joey Gallo, this team stinks. I mentioned Gallo in Kansas City. I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry. But Joey Gallo is the only guy on this team that's producing. So Yeah, and like I said, he's been hit some homers, but he has a lot of strikeouts. Again, I apologize for your Kansas City fan. I blanked on that for whatever reason. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Gallo with this team. Other than that, I mean, this team doesn't really impress me. Kyle Gibson's been probably the biggest surprise in a positive light. I'm going to go back to Kansas City real quick. I don't know why I mentioned Gallo. Andrew Benintendi's been your guy I was thinking of. Benintendi's been streaky, hot, and cold. He's had a stint or two on the injured list as well. So, yeah. We'll go to the NL, and I'll go with the NL West this time. So, San Francisco currently leads the way. LA sits right behind them. San Diego sits behind them. Colorado far behind San Diego. And Arizona even farther behind Colorado. So, San Francisco is probably the best team in the league right now, which is always nice. So, they're a team that, they're getting a lot of production out of their veterans on offense. And I don't think a lot of people saw this. This is a team that I didn't expect them to be doing this good. Here they are, sitting in first place in the NL West. More power to them. Continue doing what you're doing. Buster Posey's looking great. So Brandon Belt's doing good. Brandon Crawford's doing good. This is a team that I was not expecting to be anywhere near contention this year. The pitching staff, all these, the reclamation projects like Anthony DeSclafani have worked. So great job, San Francisco. You're clearly doing things right. The Dodgers, reigning champion Dodgers, this is a team that unfortunately just can't stay healthy. Bellinger's been on the IL for probably like 80% of the season at this point. So, of course, we're going to have to see what happens with that when he can come back. Corey Seager, same thing. He's been on the IL for at least a few weeks recently. At least he looks like he's coming back. Max Muncy's been on the IL recently as well. He should also be coming back soon. So, at least the pitching is still there. At least Kershaw has been good so far. At least Walker Buehler has been good so far. Neither of them have dealt with injuries. Unfortunately, Dustin May had to undergo Tommy John, so you lost him. But it's interesting. This team should rebound soon. San Diego sitting right behind them. So San Diego, this is another team that's been doing good, but not as good as you'd hope. So, of course, Fernando Tatis is doing great, but it's just that shoulder has been scaring me. Tatis he keeps aggravating that shoulder. Many think it might end his season, so he's something to keep an eye on. But other than that, this team is great. They have a marquee series coming up against the Dodgers, so definitely going to be watching that series to the best of my ability. Colorado, is there anything to say about Colorado? I mean, outside of Ryan McMahon and Trevor Story, is there anyone on that team that's even worth mentioning? I mean, John Gray's made a couple good starts. German Marquez has been disappointing. Charlie Blackmon's just completely fallen off the face of the earth, it seems. So, yeah, not the best team I'd be looking at. Arizona, last time I made this video, I praised you guys. I said you look good. You made a good move with Kershaw, or with Mad Bum. Yeah, Mad Bum's been on the IL for the past couple weeks. So, I mean, everything I say about Arizona, why do you guys consistently try to sign proven veterans to big deals when you can't compete? I'm going to have to stop before I keep repeating myself from previous videos. Next, we have the NL Central. Milwaukee sits in first, tied with Chicago, and then St. Louis sits behind them with a 500 record. Cincinnati also had a 500 record, and then Pittsburgh, distant last place in this division. So Milwaukee's been one of the more, I don't want to say surprising teams, but they have been a bit of a surprise at this point. Milwaukee's a team that's really getting carried by their pitching more than anything. Woodruff and Corbin Burns, both of these guys, they've come out, they've been playing very well. Yeah, they both got shelled in Colorado this past weekend series, but other than that, they both have looked very good at this point. So I like those two guys. They've both been good. Now, the problem with this team is their offense just isn't producing. They're not getting anything from the corner infield. And then, of course, Christian Yelich has just been a big disappointment once more for the second year in a row. You have to wonder if he kind of got his paycheck and kind of cashed out, but you hope not. I don't want to say that. It's way too soon to say that. Yelich, though, he needs to figure out what he's doing and fast. Otherwise, this team's going to continue to tank. So, next we have the Chicago Cubs. And the Cubs are an interesting team. Now, they did recently lose a series to the Marlins. You cannot do that. You can't consider yourself a competitor and lose to the Marlins unless you're in the NL East. That's different, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, I mean, Chicago, I don't know what's going on. This pitching staff is not doing good right now in Chicago. So, the offense, I mean, Chris Bryant is just lighting it up on offense, so you got to give him credit. But other than him, Rizzo, Contreras, Javier Baez. Actually, Baez is doing good too, but the other two, they're not doing as good as you'd hope. So Chicago has some fixing. They have to fix some of these problems. St. Louis, sitting at 500, is a bit of a disappointment to me. Jack Flaherty, though, is dealing with an injury. So we'll have to see how he does when and if he comes back soon, hopefully. Other than that, Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, these guys are doing great. Arenado's doing a bit better than Goldie, but still, both these guys are producing at the plate. They're hitting homers. They're consistent threats. Tommy Edman's been doing good. He was recently dealing with a minor injury. Paul DeJong just came back. So you have to hope that, that infield can help this team produce. Of course, they still have players like Dylan Carlson in the outfield, too. So, Cincinnati. So, this is all I got to say about Cincinnati. Offense started off the season red hot. They have since cooled down. That was expected, though. Luis Castillo, complete opposite, started off the season ice cold. He has had some good starts recently. Gonna be an interesting team to keep an eye on. They could rebound. They could come back and produce soon. Hopefully they do. The big thing, though, that offense needs to stop doing so bad. They need to figure out what the heck is going on. Pittsburgh, what do you want me to say about Pittsburgh other than Brian Hayes, possible Rookie of the Year, if he can stay healthy for the rest of the season? He missed 2 months. That's going to definitely hurt his chances at Rookie of the Year. But him, Adam Frazier's doing good. Other than that, I mean, no one in Pittsburgh is even worth really talking about. The pitching is non-existent. The hitting is very streaky at times. So Brian Reynolds is also doing decent this year. Lastly, we have the NL East. The Mets sit in first place. They're the only team above 500 in this division. The Phillies sit behind them. The Nationals sit a game behind the Phillies. And Atlanta also sits a game behind them. And then the Marlins are close enough still. So, yeah, the Mets, Francisco Lindor has turned his season around a bit from the slow start that he had. He's still not producing at the, to justify the money that you gave him. But at least he has turned his season around. It's better than nothing. The pitching, we're still waiting to see new acquisition Carlos Carrasco. He should hopefully be back soon. He suffered, a setback in his rehab. So he should be back maybe within a couple of weeks. He might be in a bullpen role to start off. Seth Lugo has come back, though, so at least they have one good player returning from injury. Other than that, I mean, the Mets are just doing what the Mets are doing. Pete Alonso, he's not the polar bear that he was in 2019, but he's still producing. I constantly underrate him every time I talk about the Mets, so I definitely had to just give him a shout out. He's doing good this year. Conforto, he dealt with an injury recently, so hopefully the Mets can turn their season around. Hopefully not, because my Phillies are sitting right behind them. I mean, the list of excuses, I could write a book, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to sum this up quickly. Injuries have just depleted this lineup. Harper, Segura, Gregorius, these guys have all spent time on the injured list. McCutchen hasn't looked good. Odubel Herrera's back, though, so I'll give him that. Of course, Rhys Hoskins recently came back. He started off this year inconsistent, but he just had a couple good games where he hit a bunch of homers. Alec Bohm, what are you doing? I have no idea what Bohm's doing. Disappointment right now. Arguably one of the biggest disappointments in the league at this point. Pitching, Nola hasn't been doing that great. He recently got shelled by the Giants. So there's that. But on the flip side, at least Zach Wheeler is looking like an ace. So that looked like a good signing. Washington's not exactly an elite team like they were a couple years ago. Juan Soto has been dealing with injuries, though. So hopefully Soto comes back. Soto's been back for a while, but he started off the year hurt, I should say. Soto, I don't know if he's playing through some injury that he's not telling the team about, but whatever the problem is with Soto, He needs to rectify it, and the team needs to rectify it sooner rather than later if they want to have a chance to compete. Trey Turner's doing what Trey Turner does. Kyle Schwarber has been one of the hottest players in baseball this past week, so I definitely wanted to give him a shout out as well. The pitching, Strasburg's doing what Strasburg does. He keeps getting hurt. He spent 2 separate stints on the IL. He's currently on the IL right now. Max Scherzer started off the year a little concerning, a little slow. He has rebounded, but still, he's not enough. Patrick Corbin, pretty similar. He started off this year really bad. He's still not looking that great. He had a good start recently, but, I mean, it's just not the best thing in the world. The Nationals, the fact that they're this close to first place is a testament to how Soto is doing, despite the fact that he's not doing great. So, now we have Atlanta. Speaking of one, I said earlier in the year I like Soto more than Acuna. Acuna probably heard my video and has proven me wrong. Acuna is just dominating. He's dealt with a few injury scares. I know there was a game a few weeks ago against the Phillies where he got hit by a pitch. So it's going to be something to see what happens. But, Atlanta as a whole is a mess right now. Mike Soroka looks like he's not going to come back this year. They keep saying, oh, no, he might be back by the end of July into August. I doubt it. Huascar Ynoa, he got hurt, doing something stupid in the clubhouse, punching the bench. I don't understand why. I understand being frustrated, but you can't do that if you're a pitcher. Like, come on, man. You can't do that stuff. He's out for a while. They're saying the same thing, the same timeline with Soroka. Oh, yeah, he might be back. So the pitching isn't there right now for Atlanta. The offense, Freddie Freeman, he's still producing, but he's not the number one first baseman in baseball right now. So, shout out to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for that. But, Atlanta, there's a lot of problems with this team. And I'm not even going to get into the Marcell Ozuna situation. Not today. He's currently hurt, but that's all we're going to get into with him. So Atlanta, they need to figure out what the heck's going on, and they need to start producing before it's too late. Miami sits in last place, but it's not a distant last place. The Marlins are the Marlins. At the beginning of the season, I said the Marlins are going to be a bottom-tier team in the NL East. I was right on that so far. The offense is doing what the offense does. The pitching is doing what the pitching does. Rogers has been a very surprising pitcher for the Marlins at this point. Probably one of the bigger surprises in the league, so I got to give a shout out to him. But outside of him, there's really not a lot of people on the Marlins that are worth talking about, excluding Adam Duvall, who, when he plays, he's been producing. Recently, he has it's either 3 or 4 homers in the past 2 games that he appeared in. So he's been smashing the cover off the ball as well. But that is the MLB standings as of the morning of June 21st. Again, I do apologize for mentioning Joey Gallo for the Kansas City Royals. I don't know why I thought he was on the Royals. But hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a good rest of your day.